Right, going back to the top story we are tracking here on DD India, the sentence given to Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh by a tribunal there. Joining us for more are Professor Veena Sikri and Professor Prabhash Ranjan. Professor Sikri is a former High Commissioner to Bangladesh and Malaysia. She is now associated with the Jamia Millia Islamic University, New Delhi. And Professor Ranjan is Vice Dean Jindal Global Law School at Sonipat. Ambassador Sikri, Professor Ranjan, welcome to DD India. If I can start with you, Ambassador Sikri, how do you view the verdict?
Well, I think in a way this verdict was inevitable because the whole narrative has been so skewed against Sheikh Hasina from the very start.
Right.
This court, this International Crimes Tribunal, the ICT as it is called in Bangladesh, has no authority at all to try Sheikh Hasina. We know that the regime of Muhammad Yunus is an unconstitutional one. There is no parliament. Parliament has been dissolved. This ICT was constituted solely to try war crimes committed during the 1971 Liberation War. And then when Yunus came to power, the first thing he did was he has completely weaponized the judiciary. In his regime, all the senior judges were forced to resign, either through mobs and mobocracy. You're showing on the visuals all these, the mobs running riot in Bangladesh, which has been happening for the last 15 months. And all their houses were attacked, etc. When all of them resigned, then Muhammad Yunus appointed people of his choice, mostly those close to the Awami League, close to the Jamaat-e-Islami. For example, the lawyer who had been defending the Jamaat-e-Islami leaders accused of war crimes in 1971 now became the chief prosecutor for the ICT. So it was quite inevitable when Muhammad Yunus announced that the cases against Sheikh Hasina were tried in the ICT. Everybody knew this was absolutely the end. This is the kangaroo court, and there is going to be a death sentence.
Indeed.
At the same time, it is so amazing that all the incidents of killing and mob violence, burning of police stations, killing of policemen, looting of policemen's weapons, all those which were committed by the Jamaat-e-Islami and the Islami Chhatra Shibir, all being described as students, all these people have received indemnity. They have been completely indemnified for all that they have done, saying this is an uprising or revolution, not at all looking at the fact that this was a very meticulously designed regime change operation. And at the same time, whatever Sheikh Hasina did, even acts which happened after she left Dhaka on 5th August are being blamed on her, and she has been given the death sentence. So I think this is absolutely fair to say that this is a completely unfair and unacceptable sentence. And I think that, the fact that within hours of the sentence, immediately they're asking for the extradition of Sheikh Hasina shows what their real intention is. But it also shows that they do not understand what the extradition process is.
Indeed.
And the extradition certainly cannot be done, within 24 hours. It's a completely complex process, which involves even a court case in India. Once India receives all the papers from the ICT, why she was tried, what were the cases against her, what was the evidence presented, was the evidence correctly evaluated. All that is going to be discussed in an Indian court and a decision passed before anything can happen.
Indeed, you've covered a lot of ground there, Ambassador. Let me delve into specifics now. Coming to you, Professor Ranjan, first question, can she appeal against the verdict? What legal remedies does she have?
Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes,
Welcome.
she can certainly appeal against the verdict at the Bangladesh Supreme Court. But I just want to quickly reflect on what Ambassador Sikri mentioned.
Sure.
It's correct. I mean, one view certainly is that ICT was created to, try the war crimes that were committed in 1971 war. But let's not forget that the ICT was revived in 2009-10. And its mandate was expanded in 24-25. Now, arguably, that was done in order to cover the so-called crimes against humanity that the Sheikh Hasina government committed. Now, whether that is legal or illegal is a moot issue. Whether we like it or not, there is a government in Bangladesh which is in control of the country. So it is a government. As far as international law is concerned. Now, whether that government is a legitimate government under the law of Bangladesh is indeed a debatable or a moot question. Now, the real issue here is what happens to the extradition request that Bangladesh officially made to India in December 2024, if I'm correct. India hasn't rejected the request. India hasn't taken a final call on it. But given the extradition treaty that India and Bangladesh have, is India under a legal obligation to extradite Sheikh Hasina? That really is the key question. Now, the answer is yes. If any request is made, the other state is under a legal obligation. But then there are quite a few exceptions in the extradition treaty which one will have to carefully look at.
Okay.
Now, some people are of the view that there is an exception for political offenses. And under that, Sheikh Hasina should not be extradited because the whole thing is political and this is a political vendetta against her. This is Article 6 of the extradition treaty. But there's Article 6.2 of the extradition treaty, which actually says that certain offenses are not considered political in nature. So, for example, crimes against humanity, which is what she has been convicted for, is not a considered political offense. So the political exception perhaps will not work there. I mean, there could be other exceptions that one will have to look at. And if you want, I can sort of talk about that as well. But the political exception perhaps will be of limited.
Right, fair enough.
As far as Sheikh Hasina's extradition request is concerned.
Right. Professor Ranjan, you made a nuanced point there. I want to take that point across from Ambassador Sikri. Ambassador Sikri, the International Crimes Tribunal was set up after Sheikh Hasina won the 2008 election. Now, this tribunal has convicted certain Islamist politicians for committing war crime during the 71 War of Independence from Pakistan. But some of them have also been hanged to death. Today, the same tribunal has convicted Sheikh Hasina, but Sheikh Hasina makes two distinctions. One, and I quote her here, she says, "The verdicts announced against me have been made by a rigged tribunal established and presided over by an unelected government with no democratic mandate." And two, she says, I quote her again, "There is no other motive than the personal pursuit of revenge against a democratically elected government that upheld the nation's independence and sovereignty." Your thoughts, Ambassador?
Yeah, well, first of all, I must remind my colleague on the panel and you that
Sure.
The mandate under which Sheikh Hasina set up the tribunal in 2010 was actually the Act of Parliament passed in 1973
Right.
when Sheikh Mujib was the Prime Minister. That was the International Criminal Tribunal Act. And under that 1973 Parliamentary Act, she then set up the panel. It was expanded, I think, in 2009, and then 2010 the panel was set up.
Right.
So I think to say that this unelected government of 2024-25 had any authority because it had no parliamentary mandate. Parliament has been dissolved. So how can you say that it has the mandate to expand the work of the ICT? This is an interim regime. Perhaps my colleague on the panel does not know what the powers of an interim government in Bangladesh are. These are highly limited, highly restricted to holding elections within 90 days and specifically saying that you have to maintain basic law and order and you cannot take any important decisions. So, first of all, it is also equally true, why I call it unconstitutional as a government, is that this government took their oath of allegiance on the Bangladesh constitution. And the Bangladesh constitution on which they took their oath actually doesn't have a provision for an interim regime. That provision was removed under the 15th Amendment. And now, of course, it is being argued in the court of Bangladesh with all these gerrymandered appointments which have been made, again, quite unconstitutionally by the Yunus regime.
Right.
They're talking about now bringing back that clause. But even if they bring back that clause, what is being discussed in the law courts, it is this, that the interim regime can only be there for 90 days, no important decisions, only maintain law and order, and conduct free, fair, and inclusive elections. Now, this regime is doing nothing of the kind. It is supposed to have a group of advisors who are apolitical, who do not belong to any political party. That is a big mandated requirement of the interim regime. Whereas this interim regime has got members of the Jamaat-e-Islam, members of the Hizb ut-Tahrir as advisors, members of the Islami Andolan Bangladesh as advisors. And we all know that it is a Jamaat-e-Islami, which is the real force behind Muhammad Yunus, and decides his every move. So I do not think that we can, just sweepingly say that international law, this government has to be recognized. One has to say what the people of Bangladesh want. And I think this is a very important point here, because the last 15 months, the people of Bangladesh has been increasingly disillusioned with the regime of Muhammad Yunus. And today, it is the Awami League, which still has its original vote bank or its original constituency intact, if not increased. And it is apprehension of this that Mohammed Yunus has decided to ban the activities of the Awami League. In fact, when he was in New York a month or so ago, and in an interview was asked why he was banned the Awami League, he said, no, I have not banned the Awami League. I have only banned the activities of the Awami League. So then he was asked, will you restore it? Yes, the Election Commission can restore it if they want. So my point is that right now, if there's any kind of credibility to be given to what is happening in Bangladesh, the need of the hour is to have free, fair, inclusive, and credible elections. I'd like to point out, for example, that in Sri Lanka, when the Gen Z expressed their anger against the Rajapaksa regime and the Rajapaksa regime resigned, the youngsters decided to go back to parliament. They had an interim president, and when elections were held, the Rajapaksa's party was allowed to participate in the elections. There was no ban on the Rajapaksa party, even though they were so unpopular and even though they had been brought down. Similarly, in Nepal, Prime Minister Oli has resigned, but there is no ban on his party participating in the forthcoming elections. So I don't see any reason why there is this decision to ban the activities of the Awami League, and this is making the Yunus regime even more unpopular. Because Jamaat-e-Islami, as we all know, has never got more than 10-12% of the population. Now they want to eliminate any popular parties. Awami League, Jatiya Party too is being left out, so that they get a higher percentage of the vote. Now, I think that it is this kind of non-democratic activities that is making the people there more and more unhappy, and really recalling that it was much better under Sheikh Hasina. And even the activities that Sheikh Hasina government was accused of by the Yunus regime are now exactly what they are doing. They are accusing, in the court cases, they accused Sheikh Hasina of ordering a firing on the people to kill. And today in Dhaka, the Yunus regime did the same thing. Before the verdict was announced, they issued an order to kill, saying if anybody disturbs the peace, just shoot to kill. So what I'm trying to say is that anytime a government is trying to maintain law and order in a country, various decisions are taken at that time. But on a one-sided basis, to try this part of one part of the activity and to say that everybody else will be indemnified because we were part of a revolution, this doesn't give any credibility. It doesn't give any sense. And to say that we are obliged to extradite, absolutely not. The extradition treaty has a process. We all know ourselves that whom India has been wanting to extradite, people who are today in the UK or other places, how difficult the process is, how many years and years go by before the extradition takes place. There is a process. There is a legal process which has to be gone through in the country where the individual whose extradition is requested is living, and that process is very clear and detailed. And actually, there has been no evidence presented in the court in Bangladesh on 1,400 people killed. Who were these people? Where is the post-mortem? Where did they die? Who is accused of shooting them? Are you accusing Sheikh Hasina of taking a gun? All of them, all of these things are things become very important indeed.
Indeed. Let me quickly get in a legal perspective from Professor Ranjan. Professor Ranjan, Sheikh Hasina makes another point. She says she has repeatedly challenged the interim government to bring these charges before the International Criminal Court in The Hague. But she says, and here I quote her again, the interim government also fears that the ICC would scrutinize its own record of human rights breaches in office. The interim government will not accept this challenge because it knows that the ICC would acquit me. Which raises two questions really. One, do we know whether Dhaka intends to move the ICC? And two, what will the legal implications be if it indeed does so?
Well, I don't think that Dhaka is interested in moving the ICC on this matter. But I think we need to understand, we need to be conceptually clear that when we say that a regime is constitutional or unconstitutional, we basically answer that question by applying the domestic law of that country. Now, it's quite probable that regime is unconstitutional as per Bangladeshi law. That's a separate question. My comment is that from international law point of view, a regime is constitutional or unconstitutional cannot be decided on the basis of any international law test. The only test that we have in international law is that there is a government which is in control of the country, and that government is the legally recognized government.
Right.
Now, it is completely the prerogative of different countries that they don't want to recognize a particular government, in the sense they don't want to have diplomatic relations with that government. That's a completely different matter. But as far as the state of Bangladesh is concerned, there is a government which is in control of Bangladesh. And therefore, that is a government under international law. Now, the other argument could be that we apply the test of what is known as democratic legitimacy, and we say that this government is not elected and therefore it is not a recognized government under international law. But that test is not settled, and that test has its own sort of supporters and those who oppose it. But the larger point is this, that, I don't want to take any sides. I don't speak for Sheikh Hasina. I don't speak for the interim government in Bangladesh. I'm speaking purely as an international lawyer.
Fair enough.
And as an international lawyer, there is a process that has been set up in Bangladesh. Now, Sheikh Hasina happens to be in India. There is a treaty between India and Bangladesh on extradition. If a request is made, that request has already been made. India will have to take a call on that request, that whether they want to extradite or they don't want Sheikh Hasina to be extradited. I'm only saying that there are provisions within the extradition treaty,
fair enough,
under which it can be
But
said
Professor,
that
India has not yet officially commented whether she is in the country or not. But be that as it may, Ambassador, you wanted to come in quickly.
I mean, this request came to India in December 2024.
Fair enough.
The request came to India in December 2024. The government is on record to say that we have received the request, but they have not taken a clear decision.
Can I quickly go across, Ambassador, one last time? Yeah, Ambassador.
I want to say one thing, that a one-liner note verbal is not an extradition request. I'm sure my very distinguished colleague is aware of the full legal process that has to accompany an extradition request. During various points where I was posted, I have dealt with these extradition requests. So I know what is an extradition request. The request made in December 2024, which our government certainly acknowledged that the note verbal has been received, of course, and the request made today by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and somebody else, another advisor said that if you don't extradite, then it will be increase of enmity between India and Bangladesh. These kind of rhetorical statements do not... With the law of extradition, or the extradition treaty, which exists between India and Bangladesh, all the clauses have to be fulfilled. A formal extradition request has to be accompanied by all documents, and it is not a formal extradition request unless the documents are there. There is no way that the government of India can even start to act on the this one-liner request unless documents are provided. That's all. I'm
afraid that's all we have time for. I would leave it at that. Ambassador Veena, Sikri, Professor Prabhash Ranjan, thank you for joining us and sharing your perspective with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.